How is everyone doing today? Welcome to my channel and thanks for tuning in. This here is an educational channel and we try to turn you on to great theories, discoveries, and concepts that you probably haven't heard of because they have been suppressed. Things that your experts and the powers that be will not tell you about. Because if you did know them, they would empower you in terms of your ability to maintain better spiritual, mental, and physical health. And we are embarking on another Bible Decode. Today is number 349. And these are things that your priest, pastor, rabbi, minister, your parents, your mentors will not tell you about. They want you to think that the Bible is the Word of God. And so you're supposed to enter into your reading of the Bible with this great deference that, oh, well, I can't question this. I'm not allowed to question this because that would show that I don't have faith. That would show that I'm not pious. Well, what exactly is what you need to do is to question what you're reading, regardless of whether it's the Bible or any book. Any book is open to the greatest amount of scrutiny because they are written by humans. And if anybody can present me with some evidence that such and such a book was written by God, then I'd be open to hearing it. But every book that I've ever seen was written by humans. And even in some cases, they might have been inspired, but over the course of thousands of years, that book has gone through the hands of a lot of people who are not inspired and who want to use this book as a weapon against you. Basically, a lot of the Christians in the society right now, they use the Bible. It's really an idol. It's a false idol. They invest it with these type of supernatural powers. They put their hand on it. They take an oath on it. They consider it to be sacrosanct, and it's everything but. It's just a book. There might be some fine messages in it. There are fine messages in a lot of other books. And so I think that's kind of the most important thing is that, I suggest that you read your Bible. And in fact, I think the people who are most deferent to the Bible are the ones who actually haven't read it or have read passages, select passages from it that are the finest parts of what the Bible has to offer without reading it in context and understanding the whole, when it was written, how it was written, what language it was written in. Most Christians can't even tell you what language the New Testament is written in, or was written in. But anyway, we have come a long way in this Bible Decode, and we are learning all kinds of different ways, lenses, and ciphers through which to interpret, in particular, the New Testament. The major one is, for me, the Roman origins hypothesis, recognizing that the Bible, the New Testament itself, is a psychological operation done by the Romans. The Romans wrote the Gospels, and they wrote them as a psychological operation against the Jews. It was a piece of wartime propaganda in order to get the Jews to mellow out a little bit by proposing a Jewish Messiah who was a Prince of Peace, as opposed to the Jewish Messiahs that they were, waiting for, which were military commanders to help them overthrow the Romans. And this psychological operation kind of got out of hand, and it's gone on for 2,000 years now, almost. Now, today we're looking more at the lens of the deists. And the deists were very active in the formation of the American Republic back in the 18th century. Deists believed that there was one God, but that God was not the author of any books, or Bibles, Testaments, or Qurans, but that God invested the human being with reason and other higher faculties in order to comprehend God's creation, God's natural creation, and to understand God through God's creation. Not one of God's books, because there is no such thing. The books were written by humans and should be treated as such. It doesn't mean that they're all bad. It just means that you need, especially if you are a truther, a Christian truther, a patriot, you've recognized all the psyops that have occurred in the 21st century and the 20th century. You recognize that you need to have the greatest amount of scrutiny for the written word, whether it's propaganda or fake news or, disinformation, medical disinformation, spin, advertising spin, or media spin. These are all things that you commonly do in your daily life, but you have not applied it to the holy book because you believe the book is holy. You believe that it is somehow wrong for you to question what you've read in the Bible because it's the Word of God. Anyway, we are looking at the work of a deist named Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine, you may know, has written a pamphlet Common Sense back in 1776. This is a later work called The Age of Reason from 1793 and 1795. And he goes into his commentaries on the Old and New Testament. Right now we're looking at the New Testament. He just got done talking about the resurrection and the empty tomb, and we'll see where he goes from here. I now come to the last scene, that of the ascension into heaven. Here, all fear of the Jews and of everything else must necessarily have been out of the question. It was that which, if true, was to seal the whole, and upon which the reality of the future mission of the disciples was to rest for proof. Words, whether declarations or promises, that passed in private, either in the recess of a mountain in Galilee or in a shut-up house in Jerusalem, even supposing them to have been spoken, could not be evidence in public. It was therefore necessary that this last scene should preclude the possibility of denial and dispute, and that it should be, as I have stated in the former part of the Age of Reason, as public and as visible as the sun at noonday. At least it ought to have been as public as the crucifixion is reported to have been. But come to the point. In the first place, the writer of the book of Matthew does not say a syllable about it. Neither does the writer of the book of John. This being the case, is it possible to suppose that those writers who affect to even be minute in other matters would have been silent upon this, had it been true? The writer of the book of Mark passes it off in a careless, slovenly manner with a single dash of the pen, as if he was tired of romancing or ashamed of the story. So also does the writer of Luke, and even between these two there is not an apparent agreement as to the place where this final parting is said to have been. The book of Mark says that Christ appeared to the 11 as they sat at meat, alluding to the meeting of the 11 at Jerusalem. He then states the conversation that he says passed at that meeting, and immediately after says, "So then, after the Lord had spoken unto them, he was received up into heaven and sat on the right hand side of God," or on the right hand of God. But the writer of Luke says that the ascension was from Bethany, that Christ led them out as far as Bethany and was parted from them there and was carried up into heaven. So also was Muhammad. And as to Moses, the Apostle Jude says in verse 9 that Michael and the this is a long footnote that I have to... No, I don't think so. I'm sorry, I've lost my place here. Okay. Michael and the devil disputed about his body. While we believe such fables as these, or either of them, we believe unworthy of the Almighty. I have now gone through the examination. Okay, let's see if we can break this down here. So also was Muhammad, and as to Moses, the Apostle Jude says in verse 9 that Michael and the devil disputed about his body. Archangel Michael, I guess, about his body. While we believe such fables as these, or either of them, we believe unworthily of the Almighty. I have now gone through the examination of the 4 books ascribed to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and when it is considered that the whole space of time, from the crucifixion to what is called the Ascension, is but a few days, apparently not more than 3 or 4, and that all the circumstances are reported to have happened nearly about the same spot, Jerusalem, it is, I believe, impossible to find in any story upon record so many and such glaring absurdities, contradictions, and falsehoods as are in those books. They are more numerous and striking than I had any expectation of finding when I began this examination, and far more so than I had any idea of when I wrote the former part of The Age of Reason. He wrote the first part in 1793 in France, in Paris, when he was about to be arrested as part of the troubles at the end of the French Revolution. He managed to survive his arrest. He finished the book just hours before his arrest, and then 2 years later he got back to writing the rest of the book. So, when he wrote the first part of the book in 1793, he did not have access to a Bible, and so with the second part of the book, he did have access to the Bible, and so that's where he's seeing. He found far more mistakes than I had any idea of when I wrote the former part of The Age of Reason. I had then neither Bible nor Testament to refer to. He calls the Old Testament the Bible and the New Testament the Testament. So I had then neither Bible nor Testament to refer to, nor could I procure any. My own situation, even as to existence, was becoming every day more precarious, and as I was willing to leave something behind me upon the subject, I was obliged to be quick and concise. The quotations I then made were from memory only, but they are correct, and the opinions I have advanced in that work are the effect of the most clear and long-established conviction that the Bible and the Testament are impositions upon the world, that the fall of man, the account of Jesus Christ being the Son of God, and of his dying to appease the wrath of God, and of salvation by that strange means, are all fabulous inventions, meaning as in a fable, dishonorable to the wisdom and power of the Almighty, that the only true religion is deism, by which I then meant and now mean the belief in one God, and an imitation of his moral character, or the practice of what are called moral virtues, and that it was upon this only that I rested all my hopes of happiness hereafter. And I think that is something that a lot of patriots these days should keep in mind, that deism is a much more suitable religion to be founding a movement upon. The Christianity is an insult to too many people's intelligences, and it is not a unifying belief system. Whereas deism is a unifying system, and even Christians can embrace at least deism, at least in some aspects. Whereas Christianity is just a plain turnoff for so many people. That's where Satanism is coming from. Satanists are people who hate Christians. If there weren't Christians, there wouldn't be Satanists. Okay, so say I now, and so help me God, but to return to the subject. Though it is impossible at this distance of time to ascertain as a fact who were the writers of those 4 books, and this alone is sufficient to hold them in doubt, and where we doubt, we do not believe. It is not difficult to ascertain negatively that they were not written by the persons to whom they are ascribed. The contradictions in those books demonstrate 2 things. First, that the writers cannot have been eyewitnesses and ear witnesses of the matters they relate, or they would have related them without those contradictions. And consequently, that the books have not been written by the persons called apostles, who are supposed to have been witnesses of this kind. Secondly, that the writers, whoever they were, have not acted in concerted imposition, but each writer separately and individually for himself, and without the knowledge of the other. The same evidence that applies to prove the one applies equally to prove both cases. That is, that the books were not written by the men called apostles, and also that they are not a concerted imposition. As to inspiration, it is altogether out of the question. We may as well attempt to unite truth and falsehood as inspiration and contradiction. If 4 men are eyewitnesses and ear witnesses to a scene, they will, without any concert between them, agree as to time and place, when and where that scene happened. Their individual knowledge of the thing, each one knowing it for himself, renders concert totally unnecessary. The one will not say it was in a mountain in the country, and the other at a house in town. The one will not say it was at sunrise, and the other that it was dark. For in whatever place it was, and whatever time it was, they know it equally alike. And on the other hand, if 4 men concert a story, they will make their separate relations of that story agree and corroborate with each other to support the whole. That concert supplies the want of fact in the one case, as the knowledge of the fact supersedes, in the other case, the necessity of a concert. The same contradictions, therefore, that prove there has been no concert, prove also that the reporters had no knowledge of the fact, or rather, of that which they relate as a fact, and detect also the falsehoods of their reports. Those books, therefore, have neither been written by the men called apostles, nor by impostors in concert. How then have they been written? I am not one of those who are fond of believing there is much of that which is called willful lying, or lying originally, except in the case of men. Except in the case of men setting up to be prophets, as in the Old Testament, for prophesying is lying professionally. In almost all other cases, it is not difficult to discover the progress by which even simple supposition, with the aid of credulity, will in time grow into a lie, and at last be told as a fact, whenever we can find a charitable reason for a thing of this kind, we ought not to indulge a severe one. The story of Jesus Christ appearing after he was dead is the story of an apparition, such as timid imaginations can always create in vision and credulity believe. Stories of this kind had been told of the assassination of Julius Caesar not many years before, and they generally have their origin in violent deaths or in execution of innocent persons. In cases of this kind, compassion lends its aid and benevolently stretches the story. It goes on a little and a little farther till it becomes a most certain truth. Once start a ghost, and credulity fills up the territory of its life and assigns the cause of its appearance. One tells it one way, another way, till there are as many stories about the ghost and about the proprietor of the ghost as there are about Jesus Christ in those four books. The story of the appearance of Jesus Christ is told with that strange mixture of the natural and impossible that distinguishes legendary tale from fact. He is represented as suddenly coming in and going out when the doors are shut, and of vanishing out of sight and appearing again, as one would conceive of an unsubstantial vision, and then again he is hungry, sits down to meat, and eats his supper. But as those who tell stories of this kind never provide for all the cases, so it is here. They have told us that when he arose, he left his grave clothes behind him, but they have forgotten to provide other clothes for him to appear in afterwards, or to tell us what he did with them when he ascended. Rather, he stripped all off, or went up clothes and all. In the case of Elijah, they have been careful enough to make him throw down his mantle. How it happened not to be burnt in the chariot of fire, they also have not told us, but as imagination supplies all the deficiencies of this kind, we may suppose, if we please, that it was made of salamander's wool. Those who are not much acquainted with ecclesiastical history may suppose that the book called the New Testament has existed ever since the time of Jesus, as they suppose that the books ascribed to Moses have existed ever since the time of Moses. But the fact is historically otherwise. There was no such book as the New Testament till more than 300 years after the time that Christ is said to have lived. At what time the books ascribed to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John began to appear is altogether a matter of uncertainty. There is not the least shadow of evidence of who the persons were that wrote them, nor at what time they were written, and they might as well have been called by the names of any of the other supposed apostles as by the names they are not called. The originals are not in the possession of any Christian church existing, any more than the 2 tables of stone written on, they pretend, by the finger of God upon Mount Sinai and given to Moses, are in the possession of the Jews. And even if they were, there is no possibility of proving the handwriting in either case. At the time those 4 books were written, there was no printing, and consequently there could be no publication otherwise than by written copies, which any man might make or alter at pleasure and call them originals. Can we suppose it is consistent with the wisdom of the Almighty to commit himself and his will to make his will to man upon such precarious means as these, or that it is consistent we should pin our faith upon such uncertainties? We cannot make nor alter nor even imitate so much as one blade of grass that he has made, and yet we can make or alter words of God as easily as words of man. Okay, I think we're going to stop right there, and we will return tomorrow with more of Thomas Paine's Age of Reason. Thanks for tuning in today. Like, share, subscribe, and comment. And we'll see you tomorrow. Come back and learn more about Thomas Paine's take on the New Testament. Meanwhile, have a great day.